Material Differences, Chapter 6, Part 1, Quiet Moments in a Restless World. Yeager really wasn't a fan of getting old. It might be a privilege he took for granted considering how many of his former comrades didn't get the chance, but that didn't mean he relished the feeling. As he sat in his car, he slowly rolled his shoulders and then reached down to rub his knees, as it felt like all of his joints were far colder than they should be. The subtle aches and sore muscles didn't fade as quickly as they used to, especially when he used canned sleep. One of Absolute Dynamics' lost formulas. Now it was a battle drug designed to replace a soldier's need to sleep. It did, sort of, but it would leave the soldier in question feeling off. It worked best if they could sleep a few hours after taking the pill to make a nap feel like a full night of sleep. Perhaps he needed to check the shelf life of his supplies, though, because he simply could not rub the tired out of his eyes this time. Yeager slowly rubbed his eyes, feeling the heat of his eyes through his eyelids. Everything just felt a little fuzzy still. With a soft sigh, he looked over at Raven in the passenger seat. Since she was only getting a trickle charge from the car's battery and it was too early for the solar panels to help, she was still fast asleep. He was sure she could be up and active by now if need be, but he let her sleep. Turning on the car, he looked over his shoulder, despite knowing he was alone in the parking lot, and pulled the car out of their spot. As he slowly crept up onto the road, he looked north and could see the smoke from the quarry fire still in the sky. Had he ignited the gas deposit? Perhaps his plan had been a bit more destructive than planned. He shrugged it off then and slowly pulled up onto the main road to head back out to the old highway. However, as he drove towards it, he saw a cop car coming the other way. As it came closer to him, it suddenly turned on its lights, though not its siren, and waited for him to pass before turning around to approach. With a frown, Yeager slowed his car and pulled off to the side. Then the cops came to a stop behind him. Reaching under his seat slowly, he tapped the hilt of one of his knives to make sure it was still there. Then he relaxed and waited. Two cops got out of their cruiser and approached on either side of his car. The one approaching his side kept his hand near his holster, though not on it. Yeager rolled down his window as they came up and just looked up at the cop leaning over his side of the car. "Got any ID?" he asked, and Yeager reached into his pocket to pull out his wallet before tugging his ID free and handing it to the cop, who took it and looked it over a moment. "Know why I stopped you, Mr. Sherman?" "No, I do not," Yeager confessed. "You were a void citizen, HM?" the cop asked as he looked over Yeager's ID. "Weren't we all?" Yeager asked, with a glance from the cop beside him to the one on the other side who was standing back a bit from the car. Killing both of them quickly would be a challenge. The one in the back might get his gun out. For now he kept his hands on his steering wheel in the open. He honestly wasn't sure why they'd stopped him. "What were you doing off the main road?" "Nothing, out in the park, you know," the cop asked, still looking over his ID for some reason. "Sleeping. I pulled off to sleep a safe distance from the road. There's an old parking lot back there a bit." He indicated with his thumb over his shoulder. "Where you headed then, Mr. Sherman?" the cop asked as Yeager frowned, unsure what the line of questioning was for. "Circuit Mountain." "For work?" he shrugged. "Ah, that explains the weapon you've got in plain sight then," the cop mentioned as Yeager pretended to look confused. "Weapon? Oh, my cutter?" He tilted his head to indicate the plasma cutter strapped to the back of his seat. "It's for work." "I'm sure it is. Do you know your car isn't registered in the new Pact database? And all former Void citizens were supposed to get new IDs. He waved Yeager's ID in his hand for a moment. "Oh, I don't really live anywhere close to any cities. Never got the message," he shrugged. "Mm-hmm. And while you were sleeping, did you see what caused that?" The cop pointed to the fire in the distance as Yeager turned to look at it a moment. "Is that what this is about? Look, we just slept in the car last night. You can probably check my tracks in the gravel. I have no idea what caused that." He feigned innocence then, but finally heard the other cop speak up. "We?" As Yeager looked over, he realized that in her scorched uniform, Raven might just look like a lump of clothes in the seat besides him. The cop stepped forward to look in through the passenger window, as the one next to him leaned down to look through more carefully. "Is this your daughter?" Yeager answered, knowing the question. "How old?" the cop on the passenger side asked. 12, he replied. "So she was—" the cop trailed off. 2. Yeah, when it happened. Jaeger nodded slowly. Seemed like the scorched outfit was going to come in handy yet again. Oof! The cop frowned and then straightened up. Just give him his ID back, Carl. We'll submit your plates to the database and get you registered. What? Tom. The cop next to Jaeger huffed, obviously not excited about the sudden turn of events. He's got an old ID and a weapon in the car. Protocol. He's clearly not a scav. Just give him his ID. We've got more important stuff to do than hassle this guy. The cop, apparently named Carl, handed him his ID but obviously wasn't happy about it, as Tom on the other side nodded to him. I'll make sure your car gets registered, Mr. Sherman. You drive safe now. Thank you. I appreciate it. Jaeger said back at the cops, walked back and got into their cruiser. He waited a moment to see that they were talking, and slowly put his car into gear and drove away. They didn't make any moves to follow him, as he neared the turnoff back onto the highway, so he figured he was in the clear. Were we just stopped by cops? He looked over as Raven slowly sat up in her seat. Yeah, just checking my registration. That's all, he explained as he could hear her yawn. The fact that Synths yawned always amused him. Then she began to reach out and stretch as best she could while still buckled up in her seat. We almost to town? She asked then, clearly just waking up and trying to figure out where they were. Not far now, he nodded. This early, the road into Gullhaven was pretty empty. It was a gray, overcast sky hanging over the town, the old amusement park on the outskirts still dark, the shadowy structures and rides looking more ominous than inviting with the weeds and vines growing all over them. Things were improving, but he figured it would still be a while before they had the means, let alone the desire to open an amusement park these days. Yet just as he thought about that when they passed the main entrance, he saw a few vans parked out front. Landscapers, if he read the signs right. Maybe someone was planning to do something with it? Or they were just going to try and clean it up before selling it. Curious, but he shrugged it off as they drove on into town. The laughter of the gulls soon filled the air as they got closer to the center of town. Gullhaven was set up on a natural delta as Blood, Sufis, and Polensk rivers all met the ocean here. It used to be a bit of a vacation destination for the people living in Basin to the south before the war. The delta made for good fishing, plus the marshes were turned into gardens that made for great romantic environments at dusk, while firebugs filled the air between the low, broad trees. Since the end of the war, it had actually grown larger since refugees from Basin headed north, and it had been unimportant enough to fight over. Though the hotels, gardens, and luxury restaurants had been left to fall to ruin, as much more practical and dense habs had been built around the edges instead. The naturally brackish water used to be good for the local gulls to get food, which was how the town had gotten its name. But these days the gulls mostly seemed to feed on leftovers and trash, all too complacent with human food. Though that did mean the local fishers had less competition over the bounty of the delta. While the crested gulls weren't actually the same as their Earth counterparts, as far as he was concerned, a gull was a gull. Scavengers you had to protect your fries from. Soon he pulled them into a small parking lot near the center of town besides an old electronics shop. As he got out of the car, he walked around to the hatch and opened it up so he could pick up his bundle of scavenged parts, letting Raven close the hatch behind him as he carried the bundle into the store. As soon as he entered, he could hear the chime from the door sensor and with it movement in the back of the store. The shelves around the store were still filled with the usual assortment of scrap and scavenged tech he remembered. Up front, it was mostly old Steward bots that didn't work as well as stereo equipment, and even a few bigger vid screens that would be hard to steal. The working stuff was in the glass counter at the back of the store. Behind that was a doorway with hanging beads in colorful patterns. Beads that were pushed aside by the shop's owner who finally stepped out. Ah, look who has returned. And with gifts! Gifts, nothing, Cov, Jaeger shot back as the Xeno grinned wide. If the Ravex were werewolves mixed with lizards, then Japasi were foxes mixed with birds of paradise. They were typically a bit smaller than humans on average, but close in height. Short muzzles, triangular ears with fur coats, and yet also full heads of hair. Their bushy tails would also spread and unfurl like many birds, though this was purely for showing off and served no useful purpose, as far as he knew at least. Though any Japasi would insist their tails were of great use when it came to attracting mates. As Jaeger approached, he set his bundle of scrap on the counter, then used the back of his right hand to pat Cov's right shoulder while the Xeno did the same to him. From there, he patted his own left shoulder and then down his body as he mimicked the dance the Xeno was going through, twisting and turning on the spot until Cov finally ended it with a big hug as he pulled Jaeger in close, kissing each side of his jaw as Jaeger returned the gesture. For Japasi, any greeting that didn't involve dancing and some form of kissing wasn't any real greeting at all. "It is good to see you as always, my friend." Kuv smiled as he pulled back from Jaeger and then gasped as he saw Raven. "Ah, but even better to see your beautiful daughter. My offer still stands, you know. 3 Clyden and 2 goats for her." Raven laughed and approached the Xeno, who did another quick dance with her before kissing either cheek of her mask while hugging her close. "My 2 favorite people on this planet," the Xeno grinned. "What about Max?" Raven asked. "He knows what he did." The Xeno lifted his nose and sniffled for a moment as Raven giggled before removing her mask. "You haven't found any synth hair yet, have you?" she asked, and the Xeno shook his head with an expression so mournful one might think someone had just died. "Alas, despite all my searching and exemplary skills as a scavenger, I have not yet acquired any. It is a tough item to find these days." The Xeno rubbed his white and blue furred face for a moment before shrugging. "Oh well, you can view my other goods, of course. For which, for my favorite people, you shall pay full price." Raven giggled again as he said that. "You're so generous, Cov," Jaeger said deadpan as the Xeno gasped with mock outrage. "You are lucky I do not charge you more. Doing business with the dead isn't so lucrative now as it once was. And not to mention all the dirt I get on my fancy shovel to dig them up. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong type of dead, isn't it? Well, no matter." The Xeno grinned and waved his hands about a moment before he walked back around the counter to unwrap Jaeger's bundle to look it over. As he inspected it, he slowly shook his head. "It is such an amazement to me the wonders you bring into trade, and how they are such garbage." "Oh, come on. Are we really doing this, Cov?" Jaeger asked as the Xeno looked wounded and kept moving his hands around as he spoke. It reminded Jaeger about the old joke that to silence a Yapasi, you just need to tie their hands behind their back. "Please? The people in this town are driving me straight up the valley. They seem to have no concept of haggling at all. One came in the other day to sell me that steward bot." He waved to an old butler bot in the corner. "It is only half broken and in decent condition, so of course I offer him a pittance of its worth. And he accepts!" I was so shocked I nearly offered him more and began to haggle on his behalf. It is disheartening. I have to go to the agri-market to get a decent haggle. And I don't even need bulbs or seed! He scoffed and tossed his hands in the air. All right. Jaeger waved him off and then pulled Raven before him and gave her shoulder a pat. "She'll haggle for me." "What?" "No! This is not fair!" Cov wailed. "She is too cute and innocent. Anytime I try to haggle with her, she gives me this look with her big eyes. Look, there it is. How does she even manage to make a bot eye look cute?" "This is a haggle crime, I say!" The Xeno raised his right arm, covering his eyes with his forearm for a moment, then carefully pulled it up to sneak a look at her once more. "No, it's too strong." He turned his head away. "I am being compelled to walk to the register and throw all my money at you." Raven giggled as the Xeno acted as if he were somehow being forcefully dragged towards his register by his own hand. "You're such a drama queen," Jaeger said with a shake of his head before Cov stopped his little act and bowed deep. "Oh yes, I am glad a peasant such as yourself can recognize royalty when they see it. Behold my majestic splendor." He raised his arms and tail, then letting it unfurl to display the white, blue, crimson, and black patterns upon it, as his colorful jumpsuit complemented the pattern. Then after stretching for a moment, they heard a soft crack, and Cov gasped and clutched his left elbow. "Ow! I have wounded myself." He made a face as he slowly wiggled his arm around. "It's important to stretch before you haggle, especially for senior citizens." Jaeger replied with a slow nod as the Xeno made a face at him. "How much more gray there is in your hair, dead man?" The Xeno shot back before sighing and shrugging it off. "As usual, I'll give you 20% of the worth of the goods." "You mean you'll give me 20% lower than its resale value?" Jaeger corrected. "Oh yes, of course." "Isn't this what I said?" "I'm sure it is what I said. Cov answered with much shaking of his head before pulling a small roll of packed scrip from his register. The net infrastructure was a far cry from what it had once been, so after a century of digital credit, actual paper currency had made a return. It was also tied to physical goods. Gold and silver weren't much use to settlers anymore, so it could be traded for rations, clean water, and batteries at treasury depots. As Cov handed over the cash, Yeager looked over to see Raven peering at the counter closely. See something? Yeah. Could we get this tablet? He walked over to see the tablet she had pointed to. Despite Cov's comment on paying full price, he knew that he'd give them a good deal on his goods. Even so, the tablet seemed pricey, especially for an old model that had seen better days. We've got much better stuff back home. Why would you want it? He asked her. Because our stuff is too nice. You always say we can't take it on trips. This wouldn't look out of place, she pointed out. Yeager considered it a moment, and then peeled off a few bills as he instead pointed to a frame and a components pack. Haggle, haggle, haggle. I'll give you this for those. That's not how haggling works, and you know it. Cov replied with a glare, but he took the bills and reached into the counter to pull out what Yeager had pointed to. Parts? Raven asked with confusion. You want a tablet? You can make it. Yeager handed her the parts. Putting a child to work? Genius. I always said those silly child labor laws were denying society a motivated and nimble-fingered workforce, Cov said with a nod. However, Raven looked thoroughly unconvinced with the plan. You've put together far more sophisticated bots, Yeager insisted. Yeah, at home! And those didn't involve finicky touchscreens. I can't put that together in the car, she protested. I'm sure Cov will let you use his workbench in back. Plus, then I can go get groceries without you trying to buy your weight in sugar, Yeager answered. Ooh. But this isn't going to be free little worker. Cov crossed his arms and looked at her with a serious expression. It will cost you. He narrowed his eyes and leaned down for a moment to look at her eye to eye. One funky chicken dance. He smiled wide and straightened up before wiggling his arms to the start of the dance. Raven let out the deepest, most exaggerated groan she could as she rolled her eyes and most of her head in annoyance at the cost. But Cov just kept wiggling. Here, I'll help you with the start. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na! Da-na-na-na-na-na-na! Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na! He clapped his hands and hummed out the tune to get her to do the dance. Yeager just laughed and left them to it as Raven finally began to wiggle her arms to the funky chicken.